welcome to the Dr. Tim Jennings Show, where you can find real answers to life's problems. I'm your host, Dr. Tim Jennings, here with Susan Collenberg.
And welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the 7 levels of moral decision-making. How do we tell the difference between right and wrong? But before we get to our topic today, we are going to take another question from our listener. His name is Ron, and his question is, how can we strengthen our minds to stand when trouble comes our way? I know the importance of prayer and Bible study, but how about focusing, visualization, repetition, positive stimulation, memorization, and positive thinking integrate into our decision-making?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the things that Ron has described there are really designed to help with certain capacities, like the memorization. You can expand your memory database by practicing memorization. Visualization, you can practice your imagination and strengthen your imagination that way. The meditation practices, you can actually learn to calm yourself. But none of those things really are going to help somebody in a difficult time. What helps somebody in a difficult time is actually practicing thinking for oneself, evaluating facts and evidences, critical reasoning, and then learning how to tolerate the disagreement, rejection, and opposition from others.
Okay, that's
the key.
Yeah.
Yes. So many people are both not very practiced in thinking through for themselves, and then tolerating it with other people come to a different conclusion.
Right. The confidence isn't there. So you wrote a book called The God-Shaped Heart and How Correctly Understanding God's Love Transforms Your Life. So tell us about the book, and then tell us about those 7 levels of moral decision-making.
So the general approach to the book is that I have this premise that God's love has been really misunderstood. And it's been misunderstood because of a single idea that has become orthodox belief across the world, whether people are Christian or non-Christian, it doesn't really matter. But there's an idea that has embedded itself deep in the psyche of humanity that is a corrosive idea, a damaging and destructive idea. And that idea is that God's law functions no different than the types of laws human beings make up. See, when you hear the word law, that word typically is understood to be a system of rules that is somehow overseen by a judicial authority, and punishments are usually inflicted for breaking those rules.
Like going through a red light.
Red light, yes. Traffic law, tax laws. This is how imposed rules. That's how most people think of law. But when I say law of gravity, laws of physics, laws of health, suddenly we realize, wait, that word law has a completely different meaning, and it has nothing to do with imposed rules. It has to do with the protocols upon which reality are built. In truth, God is the creator, the builder of space, time, energy, matter, life itself. His laws are the protocols upon which all reality exists. That's how his laws function. They're the constants. Okay. However, there's an idea that has been deeply embedded into the psyche of Christians, but the whole world as well, even those who reject Christianity. If you start talking to them about their idea of what the Christian God looks like, they will absolutely tell you it's this imperialistic dictator who makes up a system of rules, polices breaches his rules, and sin or breaking his laws, and those laws require him to keep track in some record book, and then he will one day punish those for his record for his law breaking. But Jesus came in order to take the punishment, and God punished him in your stead. And this whole legal mechanistic thing, in my view, is an infection to Christianity. It's not the true Christian gospel. It's not what the Bible actually teaches, but it came about after Constantine converted. And this idea of imperial law became the way the Christian church began to teach God's law. Prior to that, the New Testament church did not function this way. They functioned on the principles of love and beneficence. They would not go to war against Rome. They died as martyrs. They lived communally. But after this imperial law came in, after Constantine, then the Christian church suddenly goes to war at the Crusades, has the Inquisitions, willing to use coercive force. It was willing to dominate and threaten kings with excommunication and control others with coercive measures, because now this corruption is happened, and this is really the big problem both within and outside the church. And that's what the book, The God-Shaped Heart, really exposes, that you really can't have healthy living until you come back to live in harmony with how life is constructed or designed to work.
And so you need to understand those principles and then make decisions based on those principles. So we have those 7 levels.
So let's talk about the 7 levels.
Yeah.
Yes, the 7 levels of moral decision-making, you'll find they'll break down into 2 groups. One group, and we'll come to that, is the group that sees it through the imposed law model, and the other group sees it through design law. Okay. But the 7 levels, let's go through those. The most basic primitive level of telling whether something's right or wrong, that's moral decision making. How do I know if it's right or wrong? That's a moral decision. The most primitive level is reward and punishment. It's right if you get a reward for it. It's wrong if you get punished for it. Okay? This is the level of the Nazi soldiers who put people in the gas chamber. Why'd you do it? Well, I'd get punished. I'd get court-martialed if I didn't do it. So it was right to avoid punishment. This is the level of a slave mentality, avoid the whip. Okay. And in Bible, if you want a Bible example, this was ancient Israel as slaves. They were functioning at the level of slaves when they were slaves in Egypt. Level 2 is the marketplace exchange. This is the quid pro quo. Right and wrong is determined by an agreed deal. I'll do something for me in return of something we've agreed to get back. This is the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth mentality. Okay. And under this level, a ruling authority is required to put equal amounts of punishment on wrongdoers. And if you don't do it, that's considered immoral. This would be ancient Israel at the time of Sinai. Okay. Everything God has said, we will do. Right. Level 3 is social conformity. Right and wrong is determined by a consensus of the peer group. This is the adolescent. Hey, mom, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is doing it. Must be right. This is ancient Israel when they wanted their kings. All the other nations have kings. We want them too. Right. Level 4 is law and order. It's a codified system of rules that is overseen and adjudicated by a system of judges or other type of authority figures. And this was ancient Israel at the time of Christ, saying to Jesus, we have a law, you're breaking our law, and thereby healing on Sabbath and by talking to non-Jews and women and so forth, and therefore you should be stoned. Wow. Okay? Level 5, moral decision-making, how to tell whether something's right or wrong, is love for other people. Right and wrong is determined by what's actually beneficent, good, healthy for other people, regardless of the law. Thus, people who are operating at level 5 at times in America when Jim Crow laws were in operation would have treated African Americans with equality and dignity and respect, even though the Jim Crow laws said you don't. Okay. Because love for other people supersedes that. Okay. Level 6 is principle-based living. This is actually understanding design laws and how the laws upon which the universe operate work and choosing to live in harmony with those laws. And level 7 is an understanding friend of God. Not only loving other people, not only understanding God's design laws and living intelligently in harmony with them, but understanding and cooperating in fulfilling God's purposes. Okay. Those are the 7 levels. Okay. So how does this work in relation to people? Can you give us some examples? Yes. So let's do a simple one. Let's do toothbrushing. Okay. So right and wrong, brushing your teeth. Level 1, small children, it's right to brush your teeth because mommy will praise you, and it's wrong because you'll get punished. And very quickly, I saw this with my grandchildren. They move from level 1 to level 2. Mommy, if I brush my teeth, will you read me a bedtime story? No brushing teeth, no bedtime story. We've got a deal. Level 2, let's make a deal. Okay. Right. Level 3, you brush your teeth. It's right to brush your teeth so you'll be accepted at school. It's wrong because you'll be rejected at school. People make fun of you. So to fit with the peer group. Level 4, you have a codified system of expectations for the child to meet in the home. And if they don't brush their teeth, they lose a cell phone for a day. So they brush their teeth. Okay. Level 5, they come to love the parents and realize that they don't want to be a burden to their parents. And so they brush their teeth not to cause their parents expense and be a burden to their parents. Okay. Level 6, they understand the second law of thermodynamics, even if they can't say it, that if you don't put energy into a system, the system will decay. And so they brush their teeth because they want to keep their teeth actually healthy. And level 7 is understanding friend of God. You understand that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. If you don't brush your teeth, you're going to get cavities that can lead to infections. It can undermine your health. And therefore, to keep yourself in the best condition for the greatest usefulness to carry out God's purpose, you brush your teeth to stay healthy. Okay. Now, you notice at all 7 levels, people are brushing their teeth. Right. Okay. But only level 5 and above can be trusted. Level 1 through 4 operators still require some external threat, some oversight, some inflicted consequence in order to do so. If that's removed, then they stop doing it. And this is the seeing life through the imposed consequence. Right. I'll get a punishment. I'll lose my deal. I'll be made fun of. I'll have a legal problem. Okay, level 1 through 4. This is imposed law construct thinking. And if that's the only reason that a child has to brush their teeth, well, I grew up in a home, and the only reason I have to brush my teeth is because my mom has a rule. But now I've moved out of my house. I don't have the rule anymore. I guess I don't need to brush my teeth anymore. This is what happens in much of religion. They're given this instructions to do things because they'll be punished, because
God's going to get you.
Because you won't get the blessing from God if you don't do it.
Right.
Because you won't be accepted by your church if you don't do it. Because you're in legal trouble with God if you don't do it. And so they grow up, and that's the only reasons they have for things. And then they go, that's ridiculous. And they throw it off and they stop doing it. But when we teach people the protocols on how reality works, we teach kids that, hey, you know something? Yeah, there was a time I had to tell you if you didn't brush your teeth. But the reason I had to tell you that was because if you don't brush them, there's the law of thermodynamics. If you don't put energy in, they're going to decay. And you come to realize, wow, well, that makes perfect sense. I want to do that. And you internalize that, make it part of yourself. Well, now you're writing the law on your heart. It's becoming part of who you are. You don't have to have oversight and supervision. You're a self-governed, mature person. This is the growing up. Sadly, many people in religions stay stuck at level 4 and below.
Right.
And they're immature, and those types of persons are willing to persecute other people.
Okay.
Because they have rules, and they want those rules enforced.
Okay, even if it's not about them, if it's about somebody else, they'll use that same fear. It seems like there's so much fear in the levels 1 through 4.
They are fear motive. It's all self-motivated.
Right.
It's I'm going to get in trouble. I'm not going to get my deal. I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to get in legal trouble. Okay?
Right.
And so security at those lower levels are found in rule keeping. I'm on base. You can't tag me out, God.
Right.
Okay? I've paid my tithe. I've gone to church. I've kept the rule. I've been baptized in the right way. I've done the communion. I've said my Hail Marys. I've done what the rules say I do.
Church.
God, you can't tag me out now.
Right.
It's all securities in rule keeping or in vicarious rule keeping. I can't keep the rules perfect, but don't worry. Jesus came and he kept all the rules perfect, and I will claim the perfect rule keeping of Jesus, and it will put my record in heaven, and therefore God can't tag me out because Jesus kept the rules for me.
Right. So I have a question about the levels. Can you be at different levels depending upon different situations in your life? You know, can you vacillate from being mature in one area, but yet having fear about other things in another area? Is that part of maturing and growing up?
So there can be transitions, and usually you're oscillating between two levels because you're in the grow pattern between two levels. People don't really oscillate too often unless it's something hugely traumatizing and it's a brief regression, but they don't get stuck there, out of a mature level down to a level 1 type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because so you're kind of, it's all about maturation then, I guess.
Growing up.
Growing
Yeah.
Growing up. Okay, growing up into Christ. Okay. So when we come back next, we're going to be talking about some instances in your book, The God-Shaped Heart.
Hello, I'm Dr. Tim Jennings with your Mental Health Minute. Would you like to experience better physical and mental health? Then consider volunteering in your community. Studies have shown that youth who give of their time to help others perform better in school, have greater self-confidence, and are more likely to become leaders in society than those who do not. And amongst adults, those who volunteer experience better physical and mental health, lower rates of disability while maintaining their autonomy as they age. And amazingly, these benefits persisted even after taking into account baseline limitations, socioeconomic status, health status, employment, exercise, smoking, and marital status. When we volunteer to help others, we activate the brain's love circuits, which calm the brain's fear circuits, reducing inflammation, thereby reducing physical and mental illness. To be smart requires a healthy brain, so be smart, live to give.
To learn more about mental health, visit comeandreason.com.
Could it be this simple is a logical, reasonable explanation of why God is someone we can trust, based on evidence in the Bible and the natural world.
Could it be this simple is captivating and filled with examples that are down to earth, practical, and relevant for today?
Could it be this simple is the clearest and most direct explanation of why one should be a person of faith?
Get your copy of Could It Be This Simple at Amazon.com or wherever books are sold.
Welcome back. We are here with Dr. Tim Jennings, and we are discussing the 7 levels of moral decision making. And specifically, we're talking about the concepts that you have in your book called The God-Shaped Heart. And there is a story that you tell about Sandy. Can you tell the story about Sandy and just some of the particulars regarding her condition?
So Sandy was a parochial school teacher teaching at a Christian school, and she came to church wearing heavy makeup, sunglasses, and her husband was a deacon at the church, and eventually she went to the pastor because her husband had been physically beating her, punching her, knocking her around. The pastor instantly sided with her, called the husband in, said, "This is wrong, it must stop. If you don't stop, you're not going to be able to maintain your position as a deacon," advised for counseling, advised Sandy that if it happened again, she should call the police, because then have him arrested, and the courts would order him to anger management classes. But Sandy didn't want him to get arrested, might lose his job. They had kids to pay for, was fearful for what happened to the kids if dad goes to jail and loses his job and the finances. So she didn't call the police, and the beatings didn't stop. After several more years of putting up with it, she finally moves out and files for divorce.
Okay.
At which time, he goes to the church conference officials who employ her at the church school where she teaches and complains that she is unfit to teach in a Christian school because she is divorcing him without biblical grounds, as he has not been with another woman. And the conference officials fired her from her job.
Wow.
And I tell this story in the book to ask the question, what level was Sandy's husband operating at?
Right.
What level were the church officials operating at?
Right.
Okay? The church officials were clearly not operating at love for other people. They were not operating at principle-based living. They were not operating at fulfilling God's purposes. They were operating at some level 4 or below, rules, law, order.
Right.
They have a certain rule, certain structure. And what you're going to find in systems is that people who are level 4 operators, which are law and order, they are very, very passionate for the enforcement, the definition of right doctrine, the structure of the organization, the enforcement of rules, the policing even of thoughts to make sure that people all adhere to the same thoughts. They're like thought police. We all have to say the doctrines in the right way. They'll write up creeds and fundamental belief lists and have people attest to those and so forth and so on. This is level 4 thinking. And level 4 people gravitate to administrative leadership roles. Because they like the order, they like the structure, they like the enforcement of the rules, they like the policing of the breaches of the rules. And so a lot of level 4 people end up running church organizations.
Okay.
Level 5 people would be people who love other people. These are going to be people in ministry. They want to go out and work with the prostitutes, work with the HIV individuals, work with the homeless. And they will often be criticized by the level 4 people because they have loose standards, being so compassionate and kind to these people who are not in the church and not living the right life.
Not God's people.
Yes, they're breaking the rules. They deserve to suffer for breaking the rules, you see. The level 4 and belows often will think. You'll hear the level 4 and belows talking about how this particular storm was a punishment for God for the wickedness of the city. Okay,
right.
That's like level 1 thinking. God is punishing wickedness. Okay, and you see this conflicts in organizations often. So I'll give you an example of one of the conflicts. A level 7 person who is very mature, wanting to live to fulfill God's purpose, would have no difficulty living a modest life, not using their resources just to make themselves the center of all attention, not buying super expensive clothes or jewelry, and not seeking to make themselves the number 1 video on Facebook and everything else. Okay? It's not about them. It's about, and they use their resources to bless others. They wouldn't have a problem doing that, and therefore maybe they don't wear jewelry because they don't really care about it. They want to help others. A level 4 person, though, would make up rules that people have to follow in order to be the proper way in the church, such as no jewelry or no makeup for women or no pants for women, make up some type of rules that you have to follow. But they would never notice the person who maybe buys a $100,000 car or buys a $3,000 suits, because those things are not on the list.
I see. Yes, I've seen that happen in many religious situations. And speaking of religious situations, what about what are women supposed to do? We know that physical abuse is wrong. We know that emotional abuse is wrong. But what if our church tells us that we're to submit to our husbands? Not that I don't mind submitting to my husband, but I think that it's done incorrectly.
Okay, so the submission, where's the maturity level? Right and wrong decision making. Submit at level 1, what do you submit to? You submit to reward and punishment. Okay. He's stronger, he's more powerful, so he can dominate and control. That's the submission, that's what it looks like at level 1. Right. Level 2, it's all about the deal making. Level 3, it's what the consensus of my peer group thinks. If I live in a society where men beat their wives, well, it's okay because that's what the society says is okay.
Right.
Okay? So what does it actually mean, though, in truth? The level 5 and above realize that what the Bible teaches is that wives are to submit to Christ-like treatment from their husbands. Husbands are to treat their wives like Christ treats the church, sacrificing himself for her. Wives are not to submit to abusive treatment. Wives are not to submit to authoritarian dictator leadership. Wives are to submit to service leadership, husbands who serve their wives. And I've never met a wife who had trouble submitting to a husband that loved her more than himself.
So you tell a story, and I don't remember the woman's name in the God-Shaped Heart, about a woman and they're married, and the husband wakes her up on the day after the honeymoon with a bright light, like at 5 a.m. or something, with a list in his hand.
Yeah. That story's in there. I'm not going to go through all the details, but the bottom line is she got married to a guy, and then the story, his name's Herman.
Yeah.
Okay. And she thought it was the super guy, but right after the honeymoon's over, he walks in with a list of to-do things, and it has a list from every 15 minutes for the whole day of all the things she's supposed to fulfill for him every day, and only gives her like a 15-minute break. And life goes by, and she's filling this list over and over again, and it's dragging, and she's miserable, and she's unhappy because it's all about doing what's on the checklist. It's all about works. And then one day he dies, and she feels such freedom and such relief. And then the story unfolds. She says she's never getting married again, but she meets another guy. In this story, his name's Michael. And sure enough, she falls in love with him, and he proposes. And after the honeymoon, he shows up early in the morning with a piece of paper in his hand. And she gets all angry and defensive. And he had written her a poem about how much he loved her, no list, and brought her breakfast in bed, and only treated her with grace and respect. And several years into the marriage, she was in the attic going through the shoebox and found this old list from the first husband. And she looked at them, and she realized all the things on the list she was doing for her new husband, and it wasn't a burden at all, because she was glad to do all these for him. It was all out of freedom.
Right, so she had graduated and matured.
Well, I would suggest that she wasn't primarily graduating mature. That wasn't it. Right. The point of the story was not her growing up. Okay. The point of the story was the first husband was using authoritarian dictator measures over them, and when you authoritarianly dictate to people, you can never get love. You only get resentment and rebellion. But the second husband was treating her with respect, autonomy, and freedom, and that drew from her the loving service because he was treating her with love. That's the point of the story.
Okay, excellent. So talk about loving service and loving relationships. What about teens? What if you have a rebellious teen? What do you do? How do you help a rebellious teen have better decision making?
So parents must first remember their responsibilities, the parents' responsibilities.
Okay.
And the parents are responsible first and foremost for governance of themselves.
Okay.
And most parents...
So they need to demonstrate that in their life, that they have governance over
most
themselves.
parents forget, dealing with rebellious teens, that they are not primarily responsible for the governance of the teen.
Okay.
They're responsible for governance of themselves.
Right.
Okay? But what happens is they try to take their authority that they have over themselves and they try to exert that authority on the teen. It doesn't work. You end up in a battle of wills.
Right.
Okay? And then the teen even may say, okay, fine, because of this, but then behind your scene, they're undermining you and going against you. Because you're trying to exert authority over them, and you can't. They have to exert authority over themselves. So you have to remember the boundaries. So how do you deal with a rebellious teen?
Right.
You exert authority over yourself and the things that are yours to control. And in a teen's life, you control everything they care about. Okay?
Right.
You control the internet. You control the car. You control the TV. You control whether they stay at a friend's house or don't stay at a friend's house. You control the foods that are bought in the house. You control all, it's all yours.
Right.
And so there doesn't have to be an argument. So the teen has, as people grow up, and we conduct ourselves in mature ways, we gain privileges in life. Okay? Privileges.
So we don't just get everything because we deserve it.
For instance, I have a driver's license.
Yes.
I have a driver's license, and that driver's license is a privilege. It is not a right.
Okay.
And it's a privilege that I can maintain if I drive within certain reasonable boundaries. If I decide to get drunk and drive, and the state catches me, I will lose the privilege to drive.
Right.
I don't have a right to drive. Many parents forget this, and their teens forget this, and the teens and the parents start operating on the idea that teens have some rights to all these things. They don't.
Right.
And so the parent, how do you apply this? The teen has some chores to do. They don't do their chores. Well, the parent doesn't argue and I told you to get in your room and do those chores. No.
Right.
The parent exercises authority over self and says, oh, I'm sorry that you chose not to watch the Super Bowl tonight.
Right.
because you have authority over the TV.
Right.
I'm sorry you chose to lose the internet for a day. I'm sorry you chose to have your cell phone service cut for a day. What do you mean I chose to have my cell phone cut off for a day? Well, you didn't do your chores, and cell phone is a privilege for people who meet their responsibilities. You didn't meet your responsibilities, so you lose your privilege.
Right. So it's up to the parent to make the correct decisions.
And the parent has all these things, even the foods that you buy in the house. They might love a chocolate ice cream. Well, chocolate ice cream is a privilege. It's not a right.
Right.
Okay. They do have, I think, a right to actual food to eat. You don't starve them.
Good.
But that food is things like broccoli and cabbage and carrots and potatoes and some protein and the beans. Kids, you feed them all that stuff. There is no mistreatment, no abuse going on in there.
Okay, so they can't report you to the authorities.
Well, they may, but let's already laugh at them.
Right.
My parents stopped buying me ice cream.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Ice cream's a privilege.
Right.
Okay, and this is where parents, when you do this, I promise, if you do this and you are consistent and you're not fearful of the reaction of the kid, you will gain mastery in your home. This is mature decision making.
Okay, and that's what those 7 levels are all about. It kind of helps you to see how you can grow into that. What interferes with people making healthy choices? Can you talk about that real quick?
Well, what interferes with when we're talking about in the level of the 7 decision making is because they have premises and belief systems that are false. They have the false understanding of how law works and how God's government works, and so they're told and indoctrinated by their systems that it is right to punish disobedience and inflict punishment, and people confuse discipline. Comes from the word disciple, means to teach. Discipline is healthy and loving. Punishment comes from the word punitive, means to exact vengeance upon. Okay, so God disciplines those He loves. So parents discipline kids, absolutely. But to seek punishment just to take vengeance upon someone to make them pay for what they've done, that's not a godly thing.
So that's a great lead into our next show that's going to be coming up next week. And it's about your view of God and how that can change your brain.
Yeah, that's going to be our show next week, and our view of God that we hold actually changes brain structure. And so, I'm looking forward to doing that show.
Okay, everybody, join us next week. Learn more about your view of God and how it changes your brain. And go to our website for more resources at timjenningsmd.com. Thanks for joining us.